Hey there, my name's Zac Brady. In some gaming circles, I'm known as Judge Zac, and we're talking about what is DCC and how does it play. So I describe DCC as your weird stone uncle's D&D. You may have seen me on the Dark Orb. I run the DCC content there on the Dark Orb. We are running a little mini campaign at the moment, going through some of the modules there, and we've made some videos in the past about what we like about DCC and what we think makes it cool and so forth. What I wanted to make with this video series is some much shorter content so that you can just dive into playing DCC. So we all love throwing math rocks around the table with our friends, and we want to get there as quickly as possible. Of course, reading big old thick old rule books is a whole heap of fun as well, but what we really want to do is just get playing the game. Who are these videos for? So they're not for brand new GMs. If you're still learning how to run tabletop games, then this might not be for you. That said, you don't need to be a 40-year veteran of role-playing. Just a couple of games in really any fantasy system, so any D20 system should be enough to be able to get you off the ground and running with these videos. So let's dive into it. We're talking about what is DCC and how does it play. So I describe DCC as your weird stone uncle's D&D, or more fun D&D, but I suppose that's subjective, isn't it? It's an OSR, or old school Renaissance game, and so DCC draws its inspiration from the early days of D&D and tabletop role playing. Now, I wasn't there for the very early days of the 70s and 80s, the Stranger Things years, but I imagine that DCC is to those early role playing games as movie remakes now of films that fill us with a lot of nostalgia, how they kind of work. So the thing about modern movie remakes is that they aren't exactly like the original film. There's a lot of modern movie techniques and so forth built into them, and so it invokes that nostalgia in us, but it's not the same as the original. And if you were to go back to the original, you might find that you were embarrassed to be a fan in some cases. It's kind of the same with this. So it's inspired by first edition, second edition D&D, and it kind of plays with a lot of the randomness involved, and there's a lot of old school monsters and stuff like that in there, but it plays like a modern game. In terms of how DCC compares to other systems, the similarities are that, well, yeah, it is a fantasy role-playing game. It is a D20 of sorts. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's also got skill checks, HP, AC, saves, stats, and all these things that should sound pretty familiar if you've run other D20 fantasy games. So the differences are, one of the really cool things is the funky dice. So there are a whole heap of different sided dice that are going to make you dig through your pile of dice, not understanding how many sides and everything has, just like you did when you first started role playing, which is kind of fun. So the dice that can be used in DCC are D3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20, 24, and the big boy D30. Another difference between DCC and other fantasy role-playing games is that this is kind of a bit weird fantasy. There's a lot more tentacles and demon worship and stuff like that, which is kind of fun. I wouldn't say that it's super violent. I mean, not unless you kind of want to make it that way, but it's definitely weird. It's your weird stoner uncle's D&D, right? Another difference is there's a lot of random tables, which is great, like for throwing randomness and spice into your games, which is really super fun, being able to roll a die and then try and come up with a story about how did this crazy thing happen. Another difference is that there's a really high mortality rate for characters compared to other systems in DCC. So I sort of describe it as in DCC, characters are almost like a resource, just like every other thing in the game. So that's the main similarities and differences for DCC and what it's all about. So if that is the sort of thing that interests you, if you still want to jump into a DCC game, then in the next video we're going to be talking about how to choose your style of play in DCC, whether you're going to go for a long sprawling sandbox campaign or exclusively small one-shots. We're going to talk about that next. So I'll see you in that video, and yeah, I hope your dice rolls are high or low, I guess, if that's what you want. But yeah, I'll talk to you later.